Hey, it's Mark Ferguson with Invest for More, and we're back talking about the Venezuelan gang takeover of Aurora Apartments again because there's been some crazy new developments, including the building is now for sale. So I will talk about that. I talked to the agent who has it listed, who has been talking to the owner of the property, so I've got some information on what's going on there. 9 News has come out and said that these problems were happening well over a year ago. Of course, they just came out with another article saying that it was all blown out of proportion and wasn't really happening too. And we'll talk about how they were contradicting themselves. But the police knew about this a long time ago and knew as gang members, talks about them threatening all kinds of crazy stuff. And basically so many things were hidden by the police, by Aurora. And not only that, but now we have more information on what the state of Colorado is doing about this whole situation. And they're launching an investigation into one of the parties. And you won't believe who they're investigating after all of this has been happening. Actually, you probably will believe it, but we'll talk about that as well. So a lot going on with these apartments. I know it's interesting timing with the election going on tomorrow, but this property just came up for sale last week. I just talked to the agent, so I wanted to get this information out there while it's fresh. And this does have some political impacts because the way this was handled was crazy. And there were so many different things going on to try and throw this landlord under the bus. And it's insane. So those of us in real estate really, I think, should be worried and have our eyes open about what has happened in multiple cases across the country with landlords, real estate investors, and what the government has been trying to do, not just with legislation, but actually going after them, the government suing real estate investors for really doing nothing. So now in this case, I think the landlord obviously could have done better. You know, there's 2 sides to each story, but I think while the landlord could have done better, it's also crazy what the police in town and state were expecting that landlord to do as far as policing gang members themselves. Okay, so we're starting with this 9 News article, and this came out, where's our date? October 25th, so just a little over a week ago, and infamous Aurora apartment had earned a badge of honor with gangs well before problems became national story. So if you're not familiar with the Aurora apartments, here they are. We can actually play a little video, see how much they show us of it. But of course, they'll show us an ad. They love to show their ads. I do too. It's not the end of the world. But basically, in August, this became news because the city of Aurora came out and kicked 99 units out of this apartment with 6 days' notice. They said it was code violations. They said the landlord had not been taking care of the property. It was too dangerous to live in. They kicked everybody out. Now, that seems crazy because I don't know why they'd give them 6 days' notice when they said it had been years of neglect. Well, when I actually went through the documents, looked through the information, they were not kicked out for code violations. They were issued a crime nuisance letter, which stated there had been too much crime at the property. There were hundreds of calls for shootings, I believe murder, assaults, trespassing, and the landlord was not doing enough to stop this crime. And that is why they were kicked out with 6 days' notice. And people say, no, it was code violations. Well, this letter very clearly states exactly why. Code violations were never mentioned, and it was all just crime. Now, there were some code violations. I went through those. I looked through those as well. There were some serious ones, but most of the code violations were literally potholes, cars with expired plates, dog poop on rocks. Like, it was crazy. Aurora came through and was just hammering these people for every single thing they could. Now, what's ironic about the expired tags is that Colorado just passed a law that says you cannot tow cars for expired tags or no plates. But Aurora was saying that that's a major code violation for this landlord, and he needed to be getting rid of these cars that had expired plates and no tags, which would be impossible for him to do because he can't tow them. So that happened, and then, of course, there was a big news story about how it was there weren't really, well, the landlord came out and said the reason all this happened was Venezuelan gangs had taken over the building. And the news came out and said, no, there's no evidence of that. Aurora came out and said there's no evidence of that. The police came out and said there's no evidence of that. And then slowly, all this information came out showing, yes, there was massive amounts of evidence of Venezuelan gangs taking over the property, crime, threats. The property manager, housekeepers all quit because they were threatened. Their families were threatened by the gangs. There was numerous shootings, murders, etc. From possible Venezuelan gang members that the police knew about, the town knew about, and they just basically were hiding this information. And was it political? I think there's a good chance it was. Who knows? But it's just been crazy. And so I made some videos about it well before it became a political issue too, just because I thought it's so crazy about this apartment being kicked out. And so people accuse me, of course, of being a MAGA and pushing my politics when I had made these videos well before any politics were involved in it. I just thought it was insane what was happening. And then the politics came later, but I still have always based this on facts, documents from Aurora, the police. Don't get my information from any news channel, left or right, unless it's an actual document linking to an official document, an official source, because frankly, I don't trust the news on either side for anything. So anyway, let's get into what this article says about the whole situation. So 1 year ago, in the middle of growing tension between the owners of a now shuttered Aurora building on Nome Street and the city, an Aurora police officer strongly suggested in a report to the apartment's owners that the building had a blossoming problem with gangs and crime. The report, uncovered by 9 News Investigates, said for gang members, the apartment has almost become a badge of honor. Now, it's funny that 9 News is investigating this now, because in the past, they had probably 15 articles come out saying there's no evidence of gangs. It was all fake news, that it was made up by the landlord. Now, their investigation shows gang activity for over a year. The Fitzsimmons Place apartment, he wrote, was earning a notorious reputation. Gang members have told me that if you can survive in these apartments, then you are, quote, hard, he told the owners. While the officer does not mention the name of any gangs or gangs present at the building, the words provide additional context to a problem that appears to have developed well before the apartment story became national news. In one instance, according to the report sent to the owners in October 2023, a shooting was followed by specific threats. Families of the gang member suspects took pictures of each and every resident they could. They used the pictures to extort them and tell them that if they spoke to police, not only would they be harmed, their families back in Venezuela would also be harmed. So now there was also some people who said, well, we don't know this is Venezuelan gangs. Well, almost everyone in this apartment building was from Venezuela. There's obviously gang activity, and you put 2 and 2 together. There were like 10 to 15 people arrested who were confirmed Venezuelan gang members later on from this apartment complex. So yeah, I think we can put 2 and 2 together to say it was Venezuelan gang members that took over this apartment. And this is over a year ago. And one of the big things that the news and Aurora, and even the Aurora police chief at the time, who was later let go, said, well, we walked through the apartments and we didn't see any gang members. Or we interviewed people there and they said they didn't see any gang members, so that shows that there's no gang members. Of course, if you live in an apartment with gang members, you're not going to tell the news on television that there are gang members there, because as you can see, your family will probably get hurt. Just crazy how this all came about. All right, so keep going. Oh yeah, the city ultimately closed the apartments in August of this year following what city officials called systematic and repeated code violations. The owners, along with a host of politicians, have stated the apartments had become impossible to manage due to the presence of now notorious Venezuelan gang Tren de Aragua. I don't know if I say that right, probably not. While none of the documents obtained mention TDA, they do provide evidence that the owners had been repeatedly briefed not just about code violations, but the presence of crime as well. In September 2023, Aurora Police Chief Art Acevedo officially deemed the property a public nuisance. There's an extensive criminal call history for this property to include motor vehicle theft, aggravated assault, arson, and disturbing the police. Notably, crime data indicates crime rates at the property have risen almost 30% since he purchased the property in 2019. He wrote Zev Baumgarten and Nome Properties LLC. So this is the other crazy thing. The city says it was code violations, but the police, in this article right here, confirms it was crime, and the nuisance letter is what kicked everybody out. It was due to crime. They're expecting the landlord to be the police. I don't know how you do that as a landlord, right? The landlord had called the police asked for help. The landlord even called the police and asked them if they could hire off-duty police officers for security at the apartments, and the police department said no, they can't. They don't have enough to spare. I don't know how the police can tell them how the officers work off-duty. That's for someone above my pay grade. But the landlord reached out for help, and the police said no. So basically, the police said, hey, there's a lot of gangs here, a lot of crime here. You probably should do something about it. That's just not how I thought the world worked, but here we are. Here we continue. I encourage you to take quick and immediate steps to address this criminal nuisance to avoid any court action, concluded Chief Acevedo. They're taking them to court for having too much crime. The following month, the city told the owners the transient population knows of the reputation of 1568 Elm Street, and they know this is a place they can exploit for a temporary place to lay their heads in the lobby and use drugs openly. Okay, so why aren't the police there arresting them for doing that? That would be my question. In February, what are the landlords supposed to do? Like, go in there themselves and remove these people? I don't understand. The following month, the city told in February, a lawyer representing the owners told city officials it was attempting to deal with repeated squatters in some of its units. We were doing our best to mitigate the problem, he said. In an April communication between the lawyer and the city's manager of licensing grew testy. In addition to confusion over who the actual owner of the property was, Trevor Vaughn said the city wasn't fully responsible for dealing with crime and code violations on the property. The city is not responsible for running the complex, and it has been made abundantly clear what needs to and should be happening on a daily basis, Vaughn wrote. I think a lot of what I saw were issues that had been the way for days or weeks. I don't think a code officer is needed to point out piles of trash or broken windows, shopping carts, or unlawful cars with no plates. Police and I recommend 24-hour security, he said. We have to so, and then Aurora, a month later, said they had asked the owners if they would like Aurora police to help with that. We have to staff with 2 officers, she wrote. But then we saw another article that said, and the police confirmed, the landlords asked for off-duty officers, and the police said no, they can't spare them. So there's just contradicting information from the police in Aurora over and over and over again. And one thing I should mention too is that a lot of this started because Denver is a city that supports immigrants. Well, they call them migrants. But illegal immigrants can come to Denver, get free housing, free transportation, sometimes free daycare, job training. There's just a tremendous amount of resources. And Denver has the highest per capita population of migrants or illegal immigrants in the country. And so the state of Colorado even provided landlords with bonuses to house these illegal immigrants. And I think that's where this apartment building came about and was housing Venezuelan gang members, was because the state was encouraging them to do that, told them to do that, and gave them bonuses and financial incentives to do that. And then they come along and everyone throws them under the bus when they actually do these things, and it turns out, well, maybe this was a really bad idea. Why don't the police help? Why doesn't the state help? And just to show some of that, Aurora Police Chief says there's no evidence that Venezuelan gangs took over the apartment. This was September 6, 2024, a year after the police had said their Venezuelan gangs were taking over the apartment. Over and over, this was happening. Polis tamps down media frenzy over Venezuelan gang issue in Aurora. Jared Polis cast doubt Thursday on the extent of Venezuelan gang violence alleged in Aurora, slamming elected city officials for spreading false news and urging them to refrain from stoking public fears. He really hopes the city council members in charge stop trashing their own city when they're supposed to keep it safe, Polis said. He even says, we know violent crime in Aurora went down between 2022 and 2023, and we'll see further downsides. Now, they don't mention that crime in Denver and Colorado, I think, went up 70% from like 2020 to 2022, but it went down like 5% in the next year. So we're still up, way up on crime. And then what's really interesting, so if you saw that last article, it was August 29th, and then when it came out and it was undeniable there are Venezuelan gangs there, Polis said, state has been ready for weeks to assist Aurora in gang takeovers. You can't make this stuff up. It was crazy. They're just hiding it, and then they couldn't hide it. It's like, oh, we've been trying to help this whole time, but nobody wanted our help. And now we come to even more craziness, which this is 9 News again, which this article came out November 2nd, after, a week after the article that said gangs had been there for a year. Colorado Attorney General investigating Aurora apartment complex owners, documents said. So the Attorney General's office, jeez, that was awful, issued subpoenas to the property managers and owners of the apartment complex. The owners of the troubled apartment complexes in Aurora that claimed their buildings had been taken over by Venezuelan gangs are now facing an investigation themselves. 9 News is still saying it's a claim, even though their own article said it was been happening for a year. Documents obtained by 9 News investigates show the Colorado Attorney General's office has issued subpoenas to CBZ management over recent months. They're investigating potential violations of the state's safe housing laws that regulate housing conditions. The subpoena demands that the management company turn over documents related to how it screens tenants, its finances, how it handles maintenance and safety requests, and how it promotes its apartments to potential residents. The management company owns several apartment buildings in Aurora. Claims that the Venezuelan gang Tren de Aragua had taken them over and were extorting residents went viral online. They're amplified by former President Trump, who even came to Aurora last month for a speech on immigration. Documents obtained by 9 News show there have been questions about habitability and cleanliness at the apartment complexes for years. More documents show CBZ started telling the city that it believed its buildings had been taken over by Venezuelan gang over the summer. Aurora police have arrested a small number of known Venezuelan gang members in the area. It's 9 News is even after they come out with an article saying that Venezuelan gang has been there for a year, and the police have been warning the owners and how they've threatened property managers, threatened housekeepers, threatened, there have been murders, there have been shootings. They're still casting doubt on if this actually happened, because they're trying to make it political. Most articles on 9 News, they try to make political, and it's insane. But now, you don't have the state investigating, Aurora or the police for hiding information about the gangs and trying to cast doubt on this landlord and blaming him for code violations when it's actually crime. No, you have the state investigating the complex owners, the state who encouraged them to house illegal immigrants and gave them financial incentives are now saying, well, you didn't screen these tenants we told you to house correctly, and so we're going to go after you and sue you. I'm not sure if they're going to sue them, but I might have added that in there, but that seems to be the general gist of what the Colorado Attorney General is doing. So basically, if you're a landlord trying to do what the state tells you to do and things don't turn out how they want, be very, very careful. The state will then go after you and blame you for the mistakes they made. Now, I promised this building is for sale. Let's look at that. Okay, so this is the sales page. And I got an email that this property was for sale because I get lots of emails from different real estate brokers for different investment properties because I am an investor. I buy properties. In fact, when I talked to this agent, he said he would send me some stuff in Greeley, and he never did. So maybe I will reach back out to him about that. So I called because obviously I've done some videos about this, and I couldn't believe it was for sale. I went to this page, which is public, and there's the address, 99 units, fully vacant, adjacent to Fitzsimmons Life Sciences District, University of Colorado Anschutz. Year built 1970, 73,000 square feet. Now, I really, 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 really wanted to know what the price was. So that's one reason why I called. Sometimes they aren't disclosed in these deals. To get a lot of information, you have to sign a non-disclosure agreement. Even if I did that and got the information, I couldn't share it with you because that's why you sign a non-disclosure agreement. So I did talk to the agent, and let's see if we can get, there's a few pictures of the building. They had a picture of one of the units somewhere. 33% discount to Class A. That's their rents. Oh yeah, that's rents here. So this is kind of what the rents were: $1,000 for a studio, $1,300 for one bedroom, $1,500 for two bed, $1,300 weighted average. And this is what they're saying it should have been if it was, in good shape. And I'm in Greeley, Colorado, which is about an hour north of Denver. Denver has much higher prices than we do. This is pretty close to what Greeley prices would be for an apartment. So I can believe they were well under market rent for that area, although, you can say what you will about the area. Here are a few pictures of it. The roof has water on it. I can't tell. Did it rain recently? So may or may not have some roof issues. We'll see what they bought it for a couple years ago too. So we'll show you that information. They cleaned it up a little bit. It looks way better than it did. And that's the other thing too that I failed to mention. After all of this happened and came out and the city was trashing the landlord, the city had already come to an agreement with the landlord before all that happened, before they kicked out the people, because they had to have that agreement to kick out the people. They came to an agreement saying they'll drop the court cases, they'll drop the code violations, all the fines, everything, if they agree to clean up the property, put on the market to sell, or rent it and get everybody out. So the city was working with them, and at the same time saying that the landlord wasn't working with them, wasn't doing anything. You look through the code violations, and many of the code violations show the landlord was fixing stuff and fixing those things the city asked them to fix. So it's just a complete crazy bash city by the city. So here you can see one of the units, which is still has some beer cans and stuff in it. Maybe they should have cleared those out before I took a picture. Just saying. So when I talked to the agent, he said it's unpriced. I'm like, really? You don't have any idea? He's like, we're accepting offers. It is not priced at all. Even if I sign an NDA, they are not releasing a price. So that was a little frustrating, but that happens sometimes. So they said if they don't get an offer that's acceptable, they would rent it again and hire a management company to do that. Not sure if it'd be the same one or not. And they said they'd possibly be open to working with someone else who wanted to take over management and rent it and work out some kind of deal that way too. So looks like they are working to get things cleaned up and done. It's definitely way cleaned up compared to what it was before, and it is now for sale. That agent also wanted me to say that there's been a ton of money spent on the Fitzsimmons area and Schutz Medical Center area. I've been down there a few times for my dad and different stuff with my dad. So I've been in this area. And I want to say something too. I'm not making these videos trying to say all of Aurora is trash and crime ridden. I golfed in Aurora while this was all happening with some buddies. And I go down to Denver a couple times a year. It's definitely changed. It's definitely a lot different than it used to be. There's definitely more crime, more issues there, but I'm not like I don't feel like I can't go there, like it's a war zone or anything. My buddies who I golf with did joke that I should have brought my Lamborghini, although it probably would have been stolen within half an hour if I had done that. Colorado leads the nation in stolen cars. So there's been a lot of changes the last decade or so in laws, penalties for crimes, different things in Colorado, and crime has risen significantly in the state since those were implemented. There's a lot going on here. So again, I'm not saying all of Colorado is trashed and you can't go there and it's a war zone, but it is changed a lot. I think people have to be more careful, and there's a lot of policies that were put in place that created those things and has been increasing crime in Colorado for about a decade, when for a long time crime across the country was going down significantly. Colorado was the opposite and going up. Colorado is interesting in that it's got so much crime, and in the past was one of the safest states in the entire country. Again, that's kind of disappointing to see, but unfortunately that is reality. So what we have here is apartment buildings for sale. But what did they buy them for? That's the last piece of this puzzle we'll check out. All right, I didn't find public records. I found it pretty easily last time, so I'm not sure why it's not showing up. Anyway, there's an article about them selling. So sale of 2 apartment communities in Aurora shows continued demand January 9th, 2020. Aspen Grove Apartments, that's what it used to look like when it sold. Does not look like that anymore. 2 apartment properties in North Aurora have sold for a combined $19.5 million. Elm Grove, a 59-unit apartment property located at 11852 East 16th Avenue, sold for $7.2 million. And Aspen Grove Apartments, a 99-unit apartment property located at 1568 Nome Street, sold for $12,375,000. So the guy who bought this owns 3 other apartment complexes he bought at the same time. all kind of part of this deal to work with Colorado to house illegal immigrants, I believe. And actually, I did ask the agent too if the seller wanted to talk with me, wanted me to publish any quotes. I kind of wanted to see if they had anything to say, and the agent said he didn't think they wanted to talk to anybody. Every time they talked to someone, their words got twisted and they were made out to be the bad guy, so they're done talking. Can't blame them on that. Because I think they talked to CNN. I think they talked to some other people as well. I'm not CNN, but I don't blame them for not talking. So that's how much it sold for before. And let's see. Let's do just a little bit of math here before we head. Oh, I opened 2 calculators. That was fancy. What was it? 12,375,000 divided by 99, so 125,000 a unit. That's actually a pretty decent price. I'm not like an expert in this area in Denver, but that doesn't seem too bad. And then, gosh, what did we say the average rents were before? Like, we'll just say 1,200 times 99. That's times 12 divided by 0.085. So if this sold just on a gross rent multiplier of 8.5 at like the low rents, it's probably worth $16 million in that range, very conservatively. Now they were saying they could get a lot more than that if 1,600. Very, very crude numbers I'm doing here just to give a brief overview. A place might be worth 20 million if it were to be stabilized, rented at full market rent, and had good management in place, tenants who are screened, etc. Of course, this is going to have notoriety with it for the rest of its foreseeable future. I don't want to say the rest of its life. This might die down at some point. So would that decrease the value? Maybe. Would some people want to buy it because of that notoriety? Maybe, because they can make videos like me and go through the whole process and it's got national attention and news, and they might actually get on the news and get even more attention. So it could go both ways. I could see both ways. So it'll be interesting to see what kind of offers they get, who buys it, if someone buys it, if they rent it. I'll be sure to keep up on this story and see if I hear any news, or if anybody hears anything, let me know. Quite the craziness. It is a view of how our government can manipulate things and work against the people to protect their own interests. And I don't think that's rare, unfortunately. I don't think it's something that's even frowned upon by some people, but I don't think it's ever talked about as much as it should be. And I don't think the government ever really gets held accountable for doing those things either, which is unfortunate, because then it will just keep happening over and over again. So that's all I've got. Quite the craziness going on there, quite the story. And it's just going to continue, it looks like, until it's sold or rented out. And then who knows, maybe it will have more drama and craziness going on, kind of like some of my properties that I own. I should say, the last property I bought, the depot we're working on, an 8-plex in Colorado, has cockroaches, has just awful living conditions. It was way worse than this building, right? The city could have, according to what Aurora did, multiple properties across the state could be shut down for code violations, but they never are. That's the thing. Cities don't just shut down buildings and kick everyone out for code violations. They might work with the owners, fine the owners, place liens. There's all kinds of things they can do, but they don't just kick people out like that. That was just kind of crazy. And then you find out, oh, they're actually in agreement with a landlord to try and empty the place out to get all the gang members. Like, it just, the real story, if everyone would have just kind of told the truth, was it got taken over by gangs. The police didn't know how to handle it. The city didn't know how to handle it. The landlord didn't know to handle it. So they came up with an idea together to say, hey, let's evict everybody. We'll get the police involved. We'll get everybody there. Everybody gets kicked out. And then we'll figure out what to do with this property in a new slate. But instead, you had this craziness going on with all the propaganda and mistruths, and caused this huge mess and huge news story that probably never would have happened, or nobody would have known about, had they not kicked everyone out in 6 days. All right. Thanks for watching. We'll be back with more on this one and my properties, of course, too.